Hello everybody, this is Ed Waggoner over here at acelandlords.com. So this is episode number 1. So I've been thinking about doing this podcast / video series for a long time, and the jury is in and everybody wants me to do it. So we're going to go ahead and jump in feet first and start off with episode 1. So everybody knows, or if you don't know, I own Empire Property Management, and so we have a lot of issues that come up every single week and even every single day, but we try and keep everything on a calendar. And so what's going on this month is this is one of our months that we raise rents. So if you're one of our clients, customers with Empire Property Management, we've been in contact with you already, and so I'm just going to give you a little background as to why we raise the rents. We assess the rent raises twice per year, and why that's important that we at least assess the rent that often and raise it nearly every year. So there's the exception that we don't raise the rent, of course, market bearing. So I just want to go over the highlights of why it's really important for landlords to raise the rent, and especially in this economy, every single year. So first one is, I got some notes here, is we got to have to keep up with expenses. So, everything that you've installed into the home, the roof, the paint, the flooring, the appliances, all of your mechanical systems, heating, air conditioning, all those items are wearing out from the very first moment you put them in. So even if you didn't use it, age just wears everything out. And so with inflation, the rent value that you're at right now, let's say you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, and just to keep numbers simple, we're going to keep at $1,000, for the rent. The money that you spent to install all those items this year will not cover the expenses 20 years from now when you're looking at replacing the roof. It's just not going to happen. So inflation makes those dollars, that $1,000 isn't going to be worth as much in 20 years. So you need to keep up with inflation just to be able to keep up with the expenses. So that's really important, because everything's wearing out. And then you have some tenants that we call higher impact tenants, and you may land one of those, and they're not necessarily abusing the property, because tenants get to pay for abuse, but they are using the property more than if you were to just have maybe one person living in the house. And so those items need to be accounted for, and you need to raise those rents so that you can maintain your property and keep that current rent value. So current adjusted for inflation value. So in 20 years, the rent's at $1,000 now. The rents in 20 years may be $2,000, but it's an equivalent value. So it's really important that you keep those rents for that reason. So another reason is taxes. So the politicians just can't leave their sticky fingers off your money, and so your taxes go up nearly every single year, whether it's property taxes or your personal taxes. That would be income taxes from state and the federal government. The federal government right now is going down. However, in years past, it's been nothing but going up. And overall, the tax rate has been going up steadily since we came up with the income tax. So it's really important that you keep up with the current rent values for that reason, because your taxes are just going to keep going up no matter what. So as a business, unfortunately, for the purchaser of your rental, the tenant, they get to pay the taxes. It's an indirect tax, so every time they raise taxes on a landlord, in order for a landlord to continue to stay in business, they have to pass on a lot of those expenses. So politicians like to tax in that way. They don't like to tax the people directly. They like indirect taxes because it keeps them, they think, off the hook. In a lot of ways it does, because we just keep voting for the same politicians over and over. even though they raise our taxes. So it's really important that we keep the rents up for that reason. Insurance, another reason. Your insurance goes up every single year, even just a little bit. And that's kept up for inflation. So all these things need to be adjusted for inflation, so you need to keep up. This is just handling wear and tear, normal wear and tear on your property and inflation. If anything, just for those two reasons, you have to raise your rents. More than once a year is bad form. It really is. It's bad for business. So if we're going to look at being a landlord, is basically we're in the service industry, right? So we're there to provide a product also, and to continue to provide that product, which is the rental property. And so that in itself is a service-based industry, and so we have to keep our customers happy. And so when a tenant moves in to a property at a certain level, it's the landlord's responsibility to maintain that property in that condition or better. That's part of the agreement. So we have to maintain it, and that costs money. And so the tenants are paying all the bills, so we got to treat them like appreciated paying customers. But prices and expenses go up. So the next reason, and one that's maybe often overlooked, is you need reserves to improve the property. So if your property is, let's keep that $1,000 mark, if your property is at $1,000 a month and you want to move the property to the $1,200 or $1,500 mark, because that is where its property's best use is at. Okay, so that's a term, best use, that property owners use. So if you have a one-bedroom apartment on 100 acres and that's your rental, that's not probably the property's best use. So if your property is a little run down, but it's pretty decent size, and it's renting only for $1,000 because it's not in tip-top shape, and you want to move it up to that $1,500 mark, well, the best way to do that is out of cash flow. So that's why we have to keep rents up so that you can have those reserves, so when the opportunity comes, you can improve the property. Rent control. So this is a big issue. It's sweeping across the nation here and there, but politicians have found a way to buy votes by picking on landlords. Landlords are outnumbered, and so they're not a huge voting bloc anymore, and so they think they're absolutely correct. They can buy votes by picking on landlords. So rent control is a really great way of fooling tenants into thinking that they're going to get a better deal. So all of you landlords that have not been keeping up with current rents, what the new in vogue laws to pass are limiting how much you can raise the rent. So here in Oregon, our office in Eugene, we can only raise the rent this year. It's 9.9%. So if you're one of those landlords that's been given a sweetheart deal to one of your tenants who does all the maintenance, those are really great for tenants, and oftentimes they can be really great for owners, where you have a tenant that does the maintenance, they paint it, they put flooring in it, usually under the owner's, the landlord's direction, but not always. Sometimes the owner's, a hands-off type of landlord, and they just want to, collect the rent, and the tenant takes care of everything else because they got other things going on in their life. Usually it's a really bad idea to do that. However, if you're one of those landlords that has been renting a property, sometimes those properties have been rented that way for years, even decades, and the rents are really low, but it's a great deal for the landlord, it's a great deal for the tenant. Well, if you suddenly want to raise the rent and bring it to current levels because you realize that you've made a pretty serious mistake, you're in trouble, because you can only raise the rent. In some cases, like in California, some cities there have serious rent raise control down to like 2%. So in Oregon here, it's currently this year it's 9.9%, and it's adjusted every single year. So you want to keep up as close to current market values as you can, because let's say, for instance, you have a multifamily property, and one property. So multifamily properties, first of all, multifamily properties. And we really look at multifamily properties as anything more than a duplex. So we're talking about a triplex and above. Those properties are bought and sold based off gross rents and expenses. So, and they really don't have any other innate value. So if you have one unit or two units or all the units that are really behind in the rents, there's no real way to bring those rents up to market value so that you can put it on the market. So more or less, the rents need to be raised over a period of years, and it may take 3 years plus, maybe 5 years, to get the rents up, if you're really limited on how quickly you can raise the rents. And along with rent control, in a lot of places, comes the ending of no-cause notices. So you can't even move the tenants out, clean the property up, and raise the rents. So your hands are really tied. And so that will naturally bring down the value of your multifamily property, because there's no way to bring the rents up. So the buyer is going to have to carry the burden of raising the rents. You're going to get a lot less money for your property. And so it's really important to keep those rent values at market level or close to it. And so the last one, and I'm saving the best for last here, because even though there's a lot of bad press about landlords, there's really only one reason why we're in this business, and it's not for fame and glory and unclogging toilets at 2 o'clock in the morning. We're in it for the money. We're in it for whether it's the current cash flow or our retirement. A lot of landlords don't make money for a decade or more, and it's a lot of hard work. Ultimately, though, landlords are in it for the money. That's long-term investors. Some people have a rental property to hold it for them while they're getting ready to retire or whatever. So there are smaller reasons, but ultimately landlords are in it for the money. We're like any other business that provides a product or a service that we sell it to the public, and we're hoping for at least a reasonable profit. So it's important to keep your rents up so that you're making money in this. So we want our landlords, and you should be wanting your landlord or yourself to be making money, so it keeps you in the game, and maybe you'll expand and provide more. Right now we have a serious shortage of housing, which is causing rents to spike in places. They've leveled off, at least in Oregon here, pretty seriously. Mostly because pressures, supply and demand. There's big demand still, however people are basically out of money, and so rents have basically leveled out. However, when the money is not there, the incentive to provide more housing is not there, and so tenants are really suffering from that. And I feel for them, because everything's kind of out of balance. It went from being a buyer's market, a tenant's market, so they basically set the price, to where the landlord is setting the price, and that's when the economy was coming up. And now again, we're back into where it's not quite in balance. Rents really need to come up just to keep up with inflation, expenses, and everything else, just because a lot of landlords have been losing money, through the Great Recession for quite many years, and now they're just just now starting to get caught up. And so making money and making a reasonable profit is very important to our business, and don't be ashamed of being in the business for that reason. Being a landlord is not evil. Making a profit is not evil either. Everybody that's in business is there, to make a profit, and just so they can support their families and build their future. And that's all landlords are doing. So that's really important to do that. So we're gonna cap it off here. This is our first episode of Ace Landlords, so I hope everybody enjoyed it, and please leave a comment if you have anything to say. Hope to see you next time. Take care.